Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Today is double upload day. I've already uploaded my team selection video this morning. I am back again with the start of a new series which we are calling Deadline Decisions here on this channel. This will essentially be some of your final questions and dilemmas answered just before the deadline. If you do want to see this video on a weekly basis, please do smash that like button. Let's aim for 3,000 likes on today's video and also make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So in essence, this series will be relatively similar to a game week preview series, which we upload earlier in the week, and that series will stay. This is just a little bit closer to deadline, maybe a little bit less stats driven, and more so just reacting to news that we've got throughout the week and helping you with those final dilemmas before the deadline. As I say, if you do want to see more of this series, let me know down below in the comments that you do want to see more of it, and I will continue to upload. The first thing that I wanted to cover, just before I started recording this, is that Reece James is injured again with a hamstring injury. I remember to flash the tweet on the screen. Looks like he could be out for a few months. I believe he's getting his scan today. Regardless of whether it's serious or not, I would expect this to keep him out for a little bit, just due to the fact that it's a reoccurring injury. There were rumours actually in the summer during pre-season that he might need surgery. I would assume now the fact that he keeps getting injured with the same kind of injuries, I reckon he might need surgery and he could probably be out for a reasonable amount of time. So, of course, Reece James is now no longer an option for Game Week 3 and Game Week 4, you would imagine, unless he suddenly recovers. A lot of the questions, even before this James injury, was around the Chelsea assets. Should we bring them in Game Week 2? And if so, how would I rank them? And who do I think we should be bringing in? I do think for the time being, maybe in Game Week 2, and maybe potentially even in Game Week 3, despite the really good fixture against Luton at home, it may be worth just having 2 Chelsea assets and just trying to leave that third spot open, because there still is a lot up in the air. The things that we have up in the air at the moment are: who's going to replace Reece James, and will they play a back 5 or a back 4 Chelsea? We expect it probably to be more of a back 4 now with Caicedo and Lavia signing, but it could still potentially be a back 5. So who's going to replace Reece James? And we also want to find out, whoever replaces Reece James, will that make Chilwell more attacking, less attacking? For example, if it is Gusto, who we'll discuss in a second, that replaces James, and they play in a back 4, it could well be that Chilwell has to be slightly more defensive, which would have to look out for. And on top of that, we want to know who's on penalties for Chelsea, because that would massively influence it. If it is going to be Ben Chilwell on penalties, which I don't think it will be, it will make him an even better asset. If it's Jackson on penalties, all of a sudden he's the asset we thought he was, plus he's got the addition of penalties. So there is a lot up in the air at the moment, so I would probably advise, unless you really want to go for the triple up right now, to try and wait at least 1 week before going for 3 Chelsea assets. So what I've done here is I've just tried to rank them basically from the best options to the worst options. Most of these players I think you could justify having, but I think there are definitely some ones that obviously look better. I will start with Ben Chilwell. That's a fairly obvious one. Looks very, very attacking. Data always tends to be very good. Taking some set pieces too. And regardless if they play a 5-back or a 4-back, I do expect Ben Chilwell to be very attacking. It just really does depend on who replaces Reece James as to whether he'll get forward quite as much. I would say that the second best asset would have been Reece James, but for now it probably moves up to Nicholas Jackson, who I do think is probably the best forward to own at the moment outside of Haaland. If you want to go for like a 3-5-2, if you are to wildcard, which we'll discuss at the end of this video, I probably would have Jackson alongside Haaland. And for me, I've got João Pedro and money in the bank. I'm probably looking at doing João Pedro to Jackson next week for that Luton at home fixture. If Jackson also has penalties, which we don't yet know, he's not really taken them in the past in his career thus far, then that could be a massive advantage too. So Chilwell and Jackson would be my go-to. If you can only own 2 assets at the moment, it would be those. You can see both Gusto and Disassis. I'll kind of discuss them together. They're both in yellow. I feel like Gusto would probably be the most reasonable replacement for Reece James. He is kind of a right back / right wing back. When Reece James came off in Game Week 1 against Liverpool, it was £4 million defender Gusto that came on for Reece James. We just don't know, number one, how long James is out for, and number two, just long term, is he going to be the direct replacement, or could they do something else? I've seen a lot of Chelsea fans suggest that if Chelsea play in a back 5, then it is likely to be Gusto that replaces James, because he's the only real player that can play right wing back. If they play a back 4, which is much more likely, it could be Disassi that actually sits in at right back, because what basically happens is they're not quite playing as Pep does, but Chilwell bombs forward almost as like an inside forward or a left central midfielder at points, and then basically the right back in a back 4 would have to almost sit in as part of a back 3 at points. I don't think that position particularly suits Gusto. I think it probably suits Disassi more, and I feel like he could be the one to play. So there's a lot up in the air at the moment. I have still put Gusto as the third best asset, because for only £4 million, if he does start quite a bit, he could be absolute FPL gold, and he would be in pretty much all of our teams. The fourth option that I've got is actually Sanchez at 4.5. The news that has come out today is that Chelsea are no longer looking to sign a number 1 replacement for Kepa. In fact, Sanchez will be the number 1, and they're actually looking to sign a backup goalkeeper. So £4.5 million Sanchez could be excellent value if you're looking to make a goalkeeper switch. I do think Enzo could be excellent at 5 million, especially if he plays this number 10 role with Caicedo and Lavia behind him. But we don't know yet exactly what formation they'll play. They could just at the start only select one of Caicedo and Lavia, and Enzo could still be deployed quite deep, and they could play like a Gallagher, a Mudryk, or a Sterling in the 10 role. So yes, Enzo was great. Yes, he should be on a lot of set pieces, and I've seen a lot of people predicting him to take penalties. If all of that does happen, he'll be absolutely brilliant. But for the time being, I'm still not buying him at the moment. I think there are so many good midfielders to choose from that we know exactly what we're going to get from them. With Enzo, there's still a little bit up in the air. So maybe leave that third spot open for the potential to move to Enzo. I've got Colwill next, and I think probably the safest defensive option alongside Chilwell at the moment is £4.5 million Colwill. He's probably their second choice centre-back after Thiago Silva, but of course he is 4.5. He's absolutely brilliant for baseline bonus points as well. So if none of the defenders get any attacking returns, and maybe there are only a few goals in the game, there is a good chance that Colwill will pick up bonus points just due to how many passes he makes and how good he is with the ball at his feet. He's also very good at winning duels and interceptions, which helps you with bonus points too for defenders. So Colwill would probably be next. And outside of that, none of the options particularly interest me. You do have Chukwuemeka at 4.5 midfield, but I feel like, again, there are better options. You'd probably just spend the extra 0.5 for Enzo. And all the other options, I either wait and see, or I think there are better options at those price points. So for me, Chilwell, Jackson are the ones to own at the moment. I would leave that third spot open. And in Game Week 3, Game Week 4, Game Week 5, once we know a little bit more, I would be looking to either move for Gusto, Sanchez, Enzo, or Colwill. Let me know down below if you have Reece James. Are you going to be selling in this week or potentially waiting to assess next week? And also, which Chelsea assets are you looking to own for this run-in? So the next thing I want to discuss is Manchester City rotation and also some of the news we've had today around injuries and illness too. The first thing to note is that they played in the Super Cup on Wednesday evening quite late in Athens, Greece, and they then play against Newcastle on Saturday. Very short turnaround. We've seen Pep complain about this in the past, and he also complained about it in the post-match press conference where he basically sarcastically thanked the Premier League for allowing him to play on Wednesday and to play on Saturday too. A lot of the players complaining about the fact that they couldn't celebrate winning the Super Cup as a result. So there's already a lot of complaints going on, but Pep did play arguably his strongest 11, and he only made one substitute in the 85th minute, so he can't have been that worried about it. But anyway, moving on to the news that we got today, I want to firstly say, caveat, huge pinch of salt, I cannot 100% confirm this, but throughout last season, I got a lot of early team news from the same source at Manchester City, and it is a very, very good source too, about different players not travelling, injuries. I also got some news about the starting 11 in some weeks too. That source was correct, I think, on something like 17 or 18 occasions, and every time I got that information, I tweeted it almost immediately, and I shared it on my deadline stream. So you can confirm in the past, if you go back, all of the news that I've shared from that single source has been spot on. And today, that source shared with me that before Manchester City travelled back to Manchester, they had a training session. I assume this was in Athens, Greece, before they travelled back. And John Stones actually picked up a hamstring injury in that training session. So he was already out with a groin injury. Apparently he had recovered, hence he was on the bench last night for the Man City game. And then after that, he's then picked up another injury, this time with his hamstring in training. And it looks like it will rule him out for game week 2. Again, I am not the source, therefore I cannot confirm that. I'm just sharing the information because I feel like I owe it to you guys, if I've been given early news, to share it with you as soon as possible, with the caveat that I don't know if it will be correct or not, because again, I'm not the source. That being said, I feel like Akanji played in the inverted role in the Super Cup. Ake and Vardiol can both play that role too. Rico Lewis showed in game 1 that he is exceptionally good at that role as well. So even if Stones only has a niggle and it's not a long-term injury, I would potentially look to sell him anyway, because he's got so much rotation. And we've seen in the past that he struggles to start lots of games in a row because of the injury. So he might actually be rotated a little bit even when he is back fit. So I would be looking to sell Stones, but you don't have to do it this week. I feel like against Newcastle at home, I wouldn't necessarily want to switch to another City asset. And unless you don't own Chilwell, in which case I think it's a fairly obvious move to go Stones to Chilwell. Unless you don't own Chilwell, then I feel like you could just wait a week, because you've probably got an okay sub on your bench that you can bring on. Even if they're not got the best fixture, an extra week of information could be incredibly useful to find out if Stones is back, do you want to keep him? Or maybe which Chelsea defender to move to. Is it a Colwill? Is it a Disasi? Is it potentially Gusto? And I feel like that extra week could be quite useful. So I would look to sell Stones, but you don't have to do it this week. Some of the other stuff that I wanted to discuss is obviously Erling Haaland got 90 minutes. So did Phil Foden. These are two players that we own, a lot of us, and that we might be looking, in Haaland's case, to captain in game week 2. We will discuss captaincy in the next section. I'll do Salah versus Haaland, who I think is the best option. I think Haaland will still start, but this may well limit his minutes. I don't think Pep's going to suddenly rotate the entire team in a very important fixture against Newcastle at home. But I do feel like Haaland, if City are winning comfortably, which probably isn't going to be the case, Haaland could come off early. Foden I would be a little bit more worried about because Bernardo Silva missed out due to illness, but apparently it was only a small illness and we're expecting him to be back for game week 2. We'll have to wait and see what happens with the news that we get potentially on Friday around that. But Bernardo Silva should, fingers crossed, be back for game week 2. And also Alvarez, as far as we're aware, it was just a tactical decision to bench him. Alvarez only got 5 minutes from the bench. Alvarez can quite comfortably play the role that Foden was in this game. And Alvarez can play on the wings too if Man City continue with this formation where the wingers come more central. So I feel like there's a small chance that one of kind of Foden, Grealish, Alvarez do miss out. And that's assuming that Cole Palmer doesn't start as well. If he starts, then there's even more rotation. I would expect, if everyone is fully fit, just due to the midfield that Newcastle have of Bruno, Tonali and Joelinton, it looks so good against Aston Villa. I would expect Pep to go a little bit more defensive. And I feel like we might see something like Rodri, Kovacic and Bernardo Silva with someone like Gvardiol, Ake, maybe even an Akanji again, or a Rico Lewis filling in midfield too. So I feel like we might see Bernardo in that midfield role, assuming he is back from his illness. And as a result, we could see one of the attackers miss out. I suppose all of this to say, I've got no idea. I'm not Pep Guardiola. Even if you regularly predict the City lineup, you can still get it very, very wrong. I would say that if you are trying to just get an attacker for game week 2, I think there's a very good chance Alvarez starts, just due to all of these other players getting 90 minutes. And Alvarez coming on, looking okay in the 5 minutes he was on, and scoring his penalty. And also, if Haaland does come off early and Alvarez doesn't, it does look like Alvarez could be second in line for pens too. So I feel like Alvarez is a good option. Longer term, I still feel like I prefer Foden to Alvarez for expected minutes and also goal threat too. Foden's stats are really, really strong, and they tend to be stronger than Alvarez, both last season and also the season before that. Obviously, Alvarez wasn't in Prem, but Foden's data was really, really strong. So if you're looking for a really long-term option, maybe it's like game week 8 to 10, I actually think I prefer Foden. If you're just looking a little bit more shorter term, specifically you need the player in game week 2, I like Alvarez. I think if you own any of these Man City attackers for game week 2, you probably just keep them, start them, and hope that they start. I probably wouldn't be bothering buying the likes of Foden and Alvarez this week because it's a tricky fixture anyway, and we can't confirm their minutes due to the involvement in the Super Cup. We're going to move on to Haaland in a second, but very briefly, in case you skip the next section, Haaland, in my opinion, isn't an issue for starting. It's just whether he comes off early. If he does, it maybe limits his appeal for from captaincy slightly. But for me, I wouldn't be considering him as a rotation risk from the start, and I would still fairly comfortably give Haaland the armband. So let me know down below what you think of all of that. And again, please take the Stones news with a pinch of salt, but hopefully that has helped those of you that own him to maybe help you lean towards a decision one way or another. So, of course, one of the major questions this week is around Salah and Haaland for captaincy. If you own Salah, should you captain him? And if you don't own Salah, should you go out and buy him and then captain him as well? I'll address the second question first because, in my opinion, the answer is no. If you went without Salah, you knew you would face this issue in game week 2 where he's arguably the best captaincy option. We're going to discuss that in a second. And you might want to buy him, but you probably can't do that for anything less than a -4 or a -8 hit. So you knew that going into the season. We've got no new information. If you wanted to captain in Salah in game week 2, you should have just owned Salah going into the start of the season to limit the amount of transfers that you need to make. So for me, if you don't own him, you bite the bullet and you captain Haaland. But if you do own Salah and Haaland, or potentially you just decide you do want to take a hit, should you captain Salah? Should you captain Haaland? I've just got some notes next to me because I think there are quite a few pros and cons for each. And I want to make sure that I tick everything off. So starting with the pros of captaining Salah, number one, the fixture is better, right? Bournemouth at home is a good fixture. Newcastle at home is not a good fixture. As a result, plain and simple, if you're a fixtures manager, I should say, then you should be looking to captain Salah. It is simple as that for me. He's also on penalties, we know that. And yes, he came off in the 77th minute and threw a bit of a tantrum, which we'll discuss in a second for the cons. Apart from that, you would expect him to be pretty good 4 minutes, and I'd be very shocked if he doesn't start in game week 2. The other thing to note is, as you can see here, his XG in game week 1 was quite poor. 0.02 according to Fantasy Football Hub. He actually had 0 shots on target. That being said, he was very, very, very marginally offside for the goal that he scored. If you score an offside goal, of course, because it is offside, that doesn't contribute towards your XG. If he scores that, all of a sudden he's on double-digit haul, and I think there's a very different narrative. And his XG and his data in general looks a lot better too. And that also goes for Trent, who provided the assist too. So there are fine margins in FPL, and that's why you have to sometimes take context into account when you are looking at data. The other thing just in favour of Salah on that fixture, I saw this was actually discussed, I believe it was on the FPLY. I don't want to plagiarise, but I saw it discussed there. I think it was actually by Prenil, late riser. He said something along the lines of, the data would suggest from game week 1 against West Ham, and also the way that Iraola plays in the past, that Bournemouth might play quite a high line and actually press quite high up the pitch. If that is the case, this is completely a Salah game. I mean, Bournemouth pushing high up the pitch, leaving space in behind for Salah. That is exactly where Salah excels. He is so good on the counter-attack. And that is where Liverpool excel, I think, as well at the moment. They don't tend to break teams down very well at the moment. So if Bournemouth do proceed with that, they might obviously change that based on the opposition that they're playing. But if they do, that could be a very Mo Salah game. So by all accounts, great fixture. Salah will always have good data. He always tends to be good for minutes, penalties too. I think that Salah is an excellent captaincy shout. The cons of captaining Salah, or maybe the pros of captaining Haaland, Haaland's got better data, and he has done since he's come into the Premier League. He's also on penalties, arguably pretty similar for minutes, although maybe slightly more prone to an early sub. But in Game Week 1, he actually got more minutes than Salah. And also, Newcastle did look a little bit shaky. Yes, they beat Aston Villa very comfortably, but Aston Villa created a hell of a lot of chances. Watkins and Diaby had a lot of joy there. So I would look at that and think, do you know what? Actually, it's not maybe as terrible as it looks. And it is at home. I would say if it was Newcastle away for Haaland, it's a much easier discussion to be had. But Newcastle at home, we know how good City are at the Etihad. And Newcastle are a lot stronger at home too. So there are actually a few things in favour of Haaland as well. Putting this all together, in my personal opinion, you captain Salah if you own Salah. It's a much better fixture. Salah's data is always very strong. If you started with Salah in Game Week 1, the only reason I can imagine you did so was for captaincy in Game Week 2. And I've seen a few discussions around this. Do you have to captain a premium player if you put them in alongside Haaland? No. Like, Salah can still provide okay value alongside Haaland, but to pay 12.5 million for an asset that will probably score more points than the likes of Saka, Martinelli, Bruno Fernandes, but maybe will only marginally score more points, they need to do a lot more for that extra 4.5 million that you're paying for them. And as a result, I feel like captaincy is that place where they can do so. So I don't know why you would have started the season with Salah if you weren't planning to captain him in Game Week 2. And nothing has changed in Game Week 1 that would put me off Salah or put me onto Haaland. We know how good Haaland is. We know what Salah can do. The fixture hasn't changed at all, in my opinion. So really all we've got to go off is what you were planning to do before Game Week 1. And if that was to captain Salah, I think you stick with it. In my personal opinion, if I owned Salah, I would 100% be captaining this week. I'm not saying that he will outscore Haaland because I can't predict the future, but if I had him, I would captain him. And unfortunately, I don't. So the captain does just default to Haaland, and I'm perfectly happy with that. But I do think that Salah's the better one. The only other thing to mention is, of course, ownership. If you are someone that takes it into account with your decision-making and you don't want to take too many risks early on, go for Haaland. Or, if you do want to take a risk, maybe go for Salah, because I look at the future weeks. Look at Game Weeks 3 to 6, and even beyond that as well, if you want to go and look at there's no way you're captaining anyone other than Haaland for Sheffield United, Fulham, West Ham and Forest. It's just not happening. You're not going to captain Salah for any of those, and I can't see for the foreseeable future any other standout weeks where you could captain someone else other than Haaland, apart from in Game Week 2. So if you're looking for that chance to shoot up the ranks, you're looking for that chance to differentiate, Salah has got to be the guy. If you have Salah in your team, let me know down below in the comments, are you currently planning to captain him? There are actually a few questions as well around the best cheap defenders to own, and I've just listed the best 4.5 defenders in my opinion. I guess the reason people are thinking this is if you do own Reece James, Stones, and you want to move off of them, or you have a Trent and you're potentially looking to downgrade, you might not want to move to another sort of 5 to 5.5. You may want to take that money out so that you can bring in the likes of Jackson and Maddison into the attack. So here are, in my opinion, at the moment, the 6, but probably 5. The 6th is a bit of a risk. The top 5 best 4.5 million pound defenders. Rico Henry. Yes, he looked very good in Game Week 1, but I would just say the caveat, they were playing a back 5 and he was playing left wing back against easier opposition, or less difficult opposition, I should say. I do think that Brentford will revert to a back 4. Henry drops into left back as opposed to left wing back, and as a result, he's nowhere near as attacking. That being said, I still feel like Brentford are an okay defence, and I still feel like he will get forward and create too. So I like Henry for the fixtures, a bit of creativity, and also for a pretty solid defence for around a mid-table side. In second is a slightly riskier one because they do not look good defensively in pre-season or in Game Week 1, and that is Udogie of Tottenham Hotspur. I feel like he is the most attacking 4.5 that you can probably get. He's playing a very similar kind of role to what we've seen from Ben Chilwell. I just expect the Chelsea defence to be slightly better than the Spurs defence, and also Spurs' fixtures aren't quite as good as Chelsea's, but taking all of that into account, I still feel like Udogie could be one of the better 4.5s if you are looking for attacking returns as opposed to clean sheets. But then flipping in the other direction, if you're looking more for clean sheets than attacking returns and also decent bonus points, as we discussed in the first section, I do really like Colwill, or maybe even Disasi or Gusto if they look like they're going to get enough starts at right back. In fourth, I have Pau Torres. I was going to avoid the Aston Villa defender until we had more of an idea about their favoured back 4. or back 5 in some cases. The reason I think Pau Torres is now worth going for is Mings looks like he'll be out for most of the season. And as a result, I think Pau Torres has to now start alongside the likes of Konsa. It also probably makes Matty Cash slightly more nailed as well, because Konsa probably won't play that sort of right wing-back role or right centre-back role if they play an inverted player, due to the fact that obviously Mings is out, Pau Torres is coming in. So I feel like as a result, but basically most of the Aston Villa defenders become slightly more nailed, and I would probably just lean towards Pau Torres as the new man coming in. In 5th place, I do have Tarkowski. I know that sounds like a weird one because Everton did concede in Game Week 1 and they're not the best defence, but his goal threat is always really, really strong. He's excellent from corners, and Everton's fixtures are good up until about Game Week 7, Game Week 8. So if you're looking for someone shorter term that you can play in almost every single Game Week bar, maybe Game Week 2 and maybe Game Week 5, I do feel like Tarkowski's probably the one to go for, and I really do still like the idea of betting on the fact that he'll get a bullet header in one of the games. In 6th place, I do have Rico Lewis. This is a bit of a risk, but if John Stones is out long term, which we don't yet know, obviously I would probably wait to make the move. Rico Lewis could be a really, really nice option to sit in there to cover the Man City defence, but that is probably a wait and see for me. The only other defence that I've not included here that I would still say are decent is the Crystal Palace defence. Mark Gahey and Anderson picking up 9 points with 3 bonus points in Game Week 1. I feel like both of those could be good options too. So those would be some of the best £4.5 million defenders for me. But I feel like you can't go wrong with most of the options. Just back who you think will maybe get a few chances for clean sheets, rotates well with your current defenders, and maybe has a cheeky chance for either bonus points or attacking threat. So we did discuss this in the Game Week preview video, but I am aware that not everyone watches every single one of my videos. And also I did miss out the discussion of a couple of goalkeepers in there as well. So the question was, is it time for Turner? And do we rotate Turner into our starting 11 for the likes of Onana, Pickford, Johnston, and Flecken? And I think for the most part, the answer is yes. The reasons that I provided in the Game Week preview video, actually, Nottingham Forest looks pretty good defensively in Game Week 1, despite it being a small sample size. Sheffield United looked pretty poor going forward and didn't really create much against Crystal Palace at all. So, by all accounts, that looks like a really, really good matchup there. And then most of the other options that you would have, specifically Onana, Pickford, and Johnston, have Tottenham away, Aston Villa away, 2 really tricky away fixtures, and then Crystal Palace have Arsenal at home. So I don't really like any of the alternatives particularly there for fixtures. And this is the reason you chose Turner. You chose him as a 4.0 goalkeeper because he was likely to start and he rotated really well with Onana, Pickford, and Johnston. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to pick him. For me, if you own any of those other 3 keepers plus Turner, you do rotate Turner into the starting 11 and you play him. The only one that I would maybe hesitate with is maybe someone like an Ederson or an Alisson, because you've got them for a reason. Obviously, Alisson's got a great fixture. Ederson has an okay one, but he's playing for the best defence in the league. So maybe you consider starting them ahead of Turner. And then the other one, the 4.5 that I would maybe consider starting, is Flecken, just because I do think that Brentford are going to be a better defence than Nottingham Forest. And actually, I don't mind their fixture. The only thing I would say is it is Fulham away, and I do think that Fulham are pretty decent at Craven Cottage, but I'm not expecting Fulham to have a good season. I actually predicted them in my predictions video to be close to going down this season, and I back that. I don't think Fulham will be anywhere near mid-table this season. I feel like they just don't look quite at it. I think last season, they were actually 14th or 15th for expected goals conceded, so one of the worst defences in the league. Leno bails them out on so many occasions, but I don't expect that to continue. And even from an attacking perspective, I think they were very over-reliant on Andreas and Mitrovic at points last season, and yes, they had some excellent performances, but I'm just expecting, I suppose, a bit of regression. I would say that I think they are a better fixture to target from an attacking perspective. So I love the likes of Mbermo and Wissa this week. If you own them, you definitely start them. Maybe a slightly stronger team attacking-wise, and maybe therefore Flecken isn't the best pick in the world. But I would just say that Flecken's probably the only goalkeeper that I would have a bit of a 50-50 decision there. Do you start Turner? Do you start Flecken? The other 3, Onana, Pickford, Johnston, I think you start Turner ahead of them. He's got the fixture. They looked pretty good in Game Week 1, and I think you back him and hope that he has a £4 million miracle. Again, we did discuss this in the Game Week preview video, but a lot of people now over on Twitter potentially starting to think about deploying their wildcard in Game Week 2. I would say that it's probably a week early because there is so much up in the air that we don't know around Chelsea and Spurs, in particular the penalty taking situation, but also in the defence for Chelsea as well. So maybe you decide you only want to go for 2 Chelsea assets and leave that third one open. I've gone for 3 here, but it is a slight risk. But this is my updated wildcard team that I'd be going for. Even if you're not wildcarding though, this should still be useful because it's the kind of players that I would be looking to target. It is relatively similar to my team. I've got Gusto in there alongside Chilwell. Of course, that would have been Reece James, but now he's injured. I feel like you maybe take a risk on one of the defenders. If you want to go for a slightly safer one, I probably would end up on Colwill. Because you won't have Chilwell and James, and potentially you could drop out the Manchester United assets out of the midfield, this draft that I'm presenting to you actually has Salah in it. And I've gone back and forth on this. If I were to wildcard this week, would I have him? If you can get him in, to be the best captaincy option in Game Week 2, then it probably is worth doing. I know it says Haaland's the captain here. According to the Hub algorithm, Haaland's projected to get more points than Salah, but I think Salah's the best captaincy option. And the midfield's really strong. Yes, you lose one of your Arsenal assets. Yes, you use both your Manchester United ones, but you have Salah. I still think Foden's a really good pick, but you could remove him for the likes of Richarlison if you wanted to. Saka, Mbeumo, and James Maddison, then the front two of Haaland and Jackson with a really strong bench. I've actually got Johnston, Udogie, Botman, and Osula as well. I think this is a really strong wildcard draft. This is along the lines of what I would be wanting. I think if it was Game Week 3, the only real difference is I probably wouldn't have Salah because then the fixtures get a little bit trickier and you're no longer captaining him. So I probably only have Salah in a wildcard this week. If it was next week, I might bring one of the Manchester United midfielders back in because the fixtures start to improve slightly. They have obviously Nottingham Forest in Game Week 3. And I might look to get like a Diaby or a Watkins in there as well if I were to drop Salah just to spread the funds around a little bit. So that's probably what I would be going for on a Game Week 2 wildcard. This team is rated at 95% according to Fantasy Football Hub. Again, if you want to get your team rated for free, it is not too late to do so. There is a link in the description. And also, they are still running, apparently, the 50% off. I don't know how long they'll last for. So if you do want access to Fantasy Football Hub for 50% off, as little as £2 per month, but the best option is the £3 a month one. Do check that out. There is a link in the description. And let me know what you think of this Game Week 2 wildcard. So guys, there you have it. That is the first episode of the new series on this channel called Deadline Decisions. I say it's a new series. Unless I see that you guys are enjoying it, I probably won't run it every week just because it does take time to create a whole extra video every single week. So if you are enjoying this new series and you want to see more of it, please do smash a like, drop a comment down below to tell me that you want to see it again. Make sure to subscribe as well. And also, of course, I will be doing a deadline stream as well. Depending on when you're watching this, it may well be today, but it will start 2 hours before the Game Week 2 deadline. So do tune into that. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to make sure that you see that. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.